we're thinking about professional development in the construction industry or in any industry, we're really talking about what is that process that we are taking to get better at the work that we're doing. It's that process of ongoing learning, that process of upskilling, filling the gap of skills between where we are now and where we want to be, and about getting that feedback about how we're doing at work. Here's our KUDs, our know, understands, and do's for this lesson. By the end of the lesson, I hope that you know how to get feedback from a supervisor. I hope that you understand the importance of continual development in a successful career. And I hope that you are able to do this work. And the work that I want you to do is to think about your own current capacity. Think about a skill gap or a knowledge gap that you might have, and ask your teacher via formal written email feedback, ask for some feedback and say, this is where I want to be. These are the goals that I think I need to have. Do you have any other goals that you think I'd like to work on? Something like that, where you're asking for that feedback, you're trying to elicit that feedback, but you're also making some suggestions. Now, learning, you've got to understand, is an ongoing process. You never actually stop learning. If you stop learning, you're going to get bored. Now, I know right now you're probably thinking, oh, there's no way. There's no way I'm learning. As soon as I finish my trade certificate, there is no way that I'm going to be learning anything else. Now, I'm not saying you're going back to uni. I'm not saying you're going back to TAFE to do more and more courses every day of your life. What I'm saying is learning is ongoing, and sometimes that learning isn't formal. It could be learning that happens on the job. You might learn it from clients, you might learn it from your colleagues, you might learn it from your boss or your supervisor. There's a whole heap of different ways you learn things, but you need to recognize that you are always going to be learning. Now, when we think about trying to develop ourselves professionally, we need to think about this process of getting feedback. It's important that as a worker, you're able to get the feedback that you need and set the goals that are going to get you to where you want to be. You and your boss would normally work through a performance process that follows this sort of cycle, where you reflect on where you are now and what you need to achieve to be the worker that you want to be. So let's say I want to be an electrician. I need to think about, okay, what is required of a person in that job, both in terms of their professional and formal training qualifications, but also in terms of the skills and knowledge. And then once I know what I need to set goals about how I'm going to achieve those. And we normally need to achieve those within business goals. So in my scenario, if I said to Mr. Fetterplace, our principal, said, I want to train up to be an electrician, that doesn't align with the business goals of educating students. So it's unlikely he's able to support me in that process. Okay? But if I have goals that are aligned to the business, well, he might be able to give me some time. So if I said I wanted to do an extra course on laying bricks so that I could help my students to lay bricks as well, because that links very close to the school's needs of teaching students about construction, well, maybe it'll be more likely that I'm going to get approved training. So once you've got some goals set, you need to develop a plan for how you're going to achieve them, the timeline that you're going to achieve them, and how often you're going to review those goals. And then you go to the review process where you and your boss sit down and say, okay, how are you going with those goals that we set? Are you on track? Or have you achieved them? And if you have, we then start looking at rewarding. It could be a job well done, a pat on the back, congratulations. It could be a promotion. It could be extra money. It could just be a thank you and a well done. Okay? It doesn't always have to be a financial reward. And then once that's done, in a couple of years' time, you might start this cycle again where you reflect on, okay, what is it that I need to do to become even better at my job, set my goals, and you continue this cycle over and over. Learning is ongoing. Now, how do you actually get that feedback from your boss? Well, there's two ways. Your boss could come up to you and say, okay, we need to organize a meeting where we're going to sit down and look at your feedback. That typically happens in a larger company where they have performance review cycles set up. They might have a HR department or a people, performance and culture department. It's very common to happen in the corporate world. It's less likely to happen if you work in a construction company with 5 workers. If you're working for Lendlease, yep, it's likely. If you're working for Brookfield, Multiplex, any of those sorts of companies, absolutely. They probably have some really formal processes in place for reviewing the performance of their workers. Okay? But If we're thinking about those smaller companies, those ma and pa companies where it's one or two construction people working together in a sole trader or a partnership business, and they might have a few subcontractors working for them, you're going to need to go out of your way to get the feedback. And that's what we call eliciting the feedback, getting the feedback. But firstly, we need to think about who are we going to ask. Now, if you're a construction worker, you normally wouldn't ask your apprentice to give you feedback. Okay? Your apprentice might ask you though. Because you're the qualified employee, you might then need to speak to your team leader or your boss, okay, the head of the company perhaps, to get that feedback. You need to be mindful of when you're going to ask that. Now, what I'd be thinking about is starting with, okay, well, my boss is in a good mood today. We just got paid because we just finished a major job that we've been working on for the last 6 months, and everyone's in a good mood at the moment. Now is probably a good time to ask for some feedback about how I'm working. What you don't want to do is you don't want to go and pressure your boss into giving you feedback on the day that he finds out that he has to lay some workers off because of COVID-19 and there's no work to do anymore and the construction industry is changing, etc. You probably wouldn't ask it on one of the difficult days. Next thing we need to think about is how do we actually ask for this feedback? It's pretty easy. You just need to speak to people. Use your communication skills to ask for that feedback. Now, if you want some formal feedback, if it's appropriate for the company you work for, you might send them an email and formally request some feedback. If you work for a smaller construction company that probably text is the main way of communicating other than speaking, maybe you'd text them and say, hey boss, when you get in the morning, are we able to have a chat about my performance and I just want to know how I'm going. But more likely in those smaller company scenarios, the best way to ask for that feedback is to go and speak to your supervisor and let them know that you want some feedback. Don't expect the feedback right then and there. You've got to give them a chance to think about it, to reflect on it, to give you really good feedback. Okay? But you need to have that conversation to get them thinking. An example of a verbal conversation you might have might be, hey boss, are we able to have a quiet chat over here? I just want to talk to you about something. And then you go over to a little quiet area away from the rest of the workers because you don't want anyone else listening in, trying to embarrass you or make a joke out of what's a pretty serious scenario. And then you say to your boss, look, I've been working for you for 5 years now or 10 years now, whatever it is, and I really feel like I've made some good progress. You've been really helpful for me. You've helped me in my apprenticeship. I've trained up. I'm now a qualified builder. I feel like I've really, really honed my skills. I'm starting to get a little bit bored though. Not bored of doing work, but of doing the same sorts of things. And I think I want to learn something new to enhance our business and to enhance my skill set. So I was wondering if you could have a think about how I'm going at work, what sort of things you think I'm doing really well, and what area you think I might be really suited to specialize in. And if you can get back to me by the end of the week about a little bit of feedback on how I'm going and where you think I need to go. I'm sort of thinking that maybe I want to get a little bit more advanced in terms of doing metal framing instead of just doing timber framing, but I want to know your thoughts. What do you think would be my strengths? Having a conversation like that, you're more likely to get good quality feedback from your boss. You're also giving them a chance to think and reflect on it. You're not saying, give me the feedback right now. You're saying, give me the feedback in a couple of days or maybe next week. Because on the spot, they might say, oh, no, you're doing a really good job. Yeah, mate, whatever you want, I think you'd be good at it. But if you give them time to actually think about it, you're going to get much better quality feedback. Now, when that feedback happens, that process formally is usually called a performance appraisal. This is where we start talking about giving the feedback, letting people know how well they're doing, what areas of strength they have, but also setting some goals for maybe some areas of weakness or areas of future development. In a performance appraisal, the person giving it needs to be honest. There's no point lying about how well someone is working if they're not working well at all. It doesn't help you and it doesn't help them. If someone needs to improve, you need to have the conversation with them to let them know that they have areas that they need to improve on. What you don't want to do though is you don't want to be cruel. And that's why I've got that honesty without cruelty. You don't want to say, you're terrible, there's just no way you could possibly get better, you're fired. That's not how you do it. You've got to be honest and say, look, probably need to work a little bit more on your accuracy. Remember, there's been a few incidents lately where, we're building that house, that one that we've been working on, and all of the walls you made, they were awesome. They were really straight and really true, but they were 300 mils too short, and we had to rebuild all of the studs. Okay, being honest, okay, about things that have happened is good, as long as you turn it into a goal. This is where we start thinking about setting those SMART goals. Say, look, we do want you to keep working for us, but we need to think about how are we going to develop your skills and get you better. What I'm going to do is I'm going to team you up with John. John's been working for me for a couple of years. Before you make any cuts for the next couple of weeks, I want you to measure all your timber up and just get John to have a real quick look at it. He's going to check every now and then just a couple of pieces of timbers to make sure that you're cutting to the right length, because we can't keep wasting materials like that. It's honesty without cruelty, and it's setting some goals. Focus on facts of things. Things like, you made a mistake with your measurements, not you're a terrible human being. Okay? Keeping things objective, factual. Okay? Don't say, I just find that you're just not good. Okay? It's got to be factual information where you're giving real, tangible evidence of things that people are doing well or things that they're doing bad. In a positive scenario, it's not saying, you've been working really hard lately and I'm really proud of you. That's good, but maybe some more specific examples where I was really pleased with how you worked on the day. We had a bit of issues, and I remember how you were able to come up with a really simple solution of how we could use the materials we had to get some other work done while we waited for that late delivery. Okay? Really specific examples. SMART goals. A SMART goal is a specific goal. It's realistic. It can actually be achieved. It's time relevant. It can be achieved within a time frame. If you have a goal that meets the SMART criteria, then it's more likely to be achieved. Specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time relevant. And then those goals that are being set need to be aligned to the individual's goals, where they want to see themselves in the future. And it also needs to be tied in with the company goals in terms of what does our company need to do, and that's produce good quality houses that are achieved on time, safely, keeping our customers happy. Okay? So making sure those goals align to the company goals, and then the feedback that's been given from the boss to the employee ends up benefiting the individual and benefiting the company. So that's been performance development, performance appraisals, feedback, how to elicit feedback. You've got that small bit of work that I want you to work on now, which is specifically tailored around what do I need to do to get that feedback from my boss. Okay? And I want you to practice by sending a feedback request to your teacher. Good luck and well done.